Trump has issued an executive order to create a, quote, specialized unit of D.C. National Guard dedicated to public safety, expanding the Guard's role in the city amid ongoing federal intrusions into policing. Guardsmen in D.C. now are armed. This is true. I saw this last night. He's also threatened to send the Guard to even more U.S. cities, most recently threatening Chicago.
All right. Remember what we've been talking about. What are the hallmarks of modern dictatorship? And there are two of them. And my friends, the alarms are ringing. 5 alarms are ringing,
Seriously.
threatening our democracy. Remember the two things. One is control of what we think, what we believe, and what we learn. And again, I refer you to the great book, Spin Doctors, which points out how control over ideas and information are essential to the rise of modern dictators and really have been true throughout much of history. Now, thank you. You threw me off there.
Oh.
The second thing is, of course, the use of police and military force to make sure that the political controls of the authoritarian are in place. And again, to give you a little bit of historical perspective on this, every modern dictatorship has had its own police, paramilitary force at its command, accountable and controllable to no one but the authoritarian leader himself. I repeat that, an unaccountable police or paramilitary force to be used and deployed as the authoritarian sees fit, with no accountability, no controls, no obvious limits. Let me give you a few historical examples. We, of course, know about the Soviet Union's KGB and its successor units in Vladimir Putin's Russian dictatorship. You can even go back to the Tsars, which preceded the Soviets, and they had their own Tsarist police. The Shah of Iran, while he was a dictator, had his Savak police at his command. The notorious bloody dictator of Haiti, Papadoc Duvalier, had his police force, the notorious Teuton Makut. And of course, Nazi Germany, Hitler, had his Gestapo and his SS forces. Even before that, Mussolini, who preceded Hitler as a 20th century dictator, had his own police force, the OVRA. China, of course, has the State Security Police, and North Korea has its Ministry of State Security. Trump already has his ICE battalions, again accountable, controllable to no one but himself. They are masked. They pull people off the street. They raid workplaces and other public and private places. They don't use warrants, and is accountable to no one but the president, which he can use as his own personal police force, much like other authoritarians in the examples I gave you. But he hasn't stopped there, has he, Sam?
No.
You pointed out he is now calling for a specialized unit of the National Guard that he can deploy anywhere he wants in response only to his own politics and his own interests. We know in deploying National Guard to the D.C., he simply fabricated. He simply made up crime statistics, claiming, that crime is soaring in the district when, in fact, crime is going down. Now he's threatened to send it to Chicago and other cities in blue states. Sam, we know it's not just the D.C. Guard that's been deployed in D.C., is it?
No, there have been a number of states that have sent the National Guard from their states to D.C. Those include Louisiana, Mississippi, Ohio, South Carolina, Tennessee, and West Virginia. And within those states, 10 cities within those states have a higher crime rate than Washington, D.C.
And a higher crime rate than Chicago, Illinois. In fact, I'm looking here at U.S. News and World Report.
Right.
Their ranking of the 20, I'm looking at the top 20 most dangerous cities in the U.S. Guess what 2 cities are not on their list?
D.C. or Chicago.
Guess it correctly. And the majority of them, guess what, are from red states. You said Tennessee, right?
Right.
Memphis, number 1.
Right.
Was Missouri on the list?
No.
Okay. Louisiana. Alexandria, Louisiana in the top 10. You said Ohio. Cleveland in the top 10. New Orleans in the top 10. Monroe, Louisiana in the top 10. We can go on, but you can Myrtle Beach, South Carolina in the top 15.
Really? Wow.
Yes. It's just astounding, all of these very dangerous cities in red states that Trump couldn't care less about. And there are other cities in other red states that are not among the 5 that sent their National Guard to D.C., while totally neglecting what's going on in their own backyards. Much more serious crime in these cities, overall in the red states, and specifically in the 5 states that have sent deployments to Washington, D.C. So what Trump is doing has absolutely nothing to do with actually fighting crime. If he wanted to fight crime, he'd pick the highest crime cities, right?
Right.
Which are mostly in these red states.
Not only that, I mean, we've discussed this too. Sending in the National Guard to fight crime is at best a Band-Aid solution. It does not. Go ahead. You can go.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with fighting crime. You think Trump, who's a 34-count convicted felon who was indicted for some of the most serious crimes.
I know, but I'm not just talking about Trump. I'm talking about Trump and his defenders who are saying, what, this is good. This is fighting crime. It's a Band-Aid solution. It doesn't address any of the underlying issues of crime. And after 30 days, these National Guard troops leave. What's going to stop crime from rising again in 3 months or 6 months or 3 years? Or, you know what I mean?
Nothing. Or
Nothing.
3 days or a week. Nothing. We talked about this before.
Yeah.
If you're really serious about fighting crime, sending in the troops is the last thing you should be doing. You should be working, not defying local officials, working with local officials to figure out the underlying sources of crime and how they can dealt with. This idea that crime should be dealt with this extreme, even military policing, goes all the way back historically to the early 19th century, when in the South you had these slave patrols designed to control the so-called dangerous classes. And they had all kinds of military powers. They were linked up with the militia. They were not only controlling slaves, they were controlling free black people. Then we had the militia and the National Guard in the 19th century constantly intervening to, again, control the now so-called dangerous classes, immigrants, workers, so-called vagrants, vagabonds. They intervened on the side of the employers, along with private guards, to break strikes. And throughout the 20th and 21st century, policing has been notorious in over-policing minority communities, particularly black communities, and underperforming in terms of really fighting crime there. And that's exactly what we are seeing here, except it's now accelerated to a degree we have never before seen in American history. We now have
scary.
It's a five-alarm fire.
I was hanging out in D.C. last night, and it's end of August, the weather's cooling down, people are back to school, going back to work. It's usually a time in D.C. that's full of life, full of energy. DC is eerie, man. Like, I was in DuPont Circle. There was nobody around. The energy was totally off. There were National Guard troops just standing with armed in DuPont Circle. I don't know what they were doing.
Semi-automatic weapons.
No, then
assault rifles.
I wanted to check out the National Mall and see what was happening. So I drove down to the National Mall and I saw maybe 6 National Guard troops just marching down, I forgot which road it is, with full-on AR-15s. And again, nobody's out in the streets. It's a really bad situation that's happening in DC. And another interesting thing I heard today, this is an NPR report, that actually in 2014 was the highest year of international visitors to DC, and already they're predicting that it's going to be 2025, since Trump has taken over, a massive decrease in tourism to DC mostly because of immigration issues. But now this on top of it is just going to add fuel to the fire.
2 essentially secret police, commanded only by Trump and his allies, and accountable to absolutely nobody, just like all those secret police from the most notorious dictatorships that I have talked about. And Sam, you put your finger on something very important. 2 important things you pointed out. One, sending in the troops is not a long-term solution to crime. It's the worst way if you really want to control crime and not intimidate people like police forces and militias have done throughout our history. This is the worst way to do it. Plus, as you point out, it turns these cities into ghost towns. People don't want to go to restaurants. They don't want to go to nightlife in D.C. They don't want to go to monuments. They're afraid to leave their homes. And it's not just your astute observations. There are now lots of reporting indicating, number one, the tourism decline, but also decline in business for revenue, for restaurants, and nightlife. It's the last thing an economically struggling city needs, is to be losing all this business and to no end.
And it's totally dystopian. You've got this billionaire in the White House who's probably never set foot or walked around D.C., maybe ever, certainly not in the last 40 years since he's been rich and famous. And somehow he thinks he has this understanding of D.C. when he talks about it, and he knows how to make it better. I mean, he's ruining D.C. I mean, first with firing all the federal employees, that was a first major blow, and now with the National Guard. And the way he talks about these cities, D.C., New York, Baltimore. I mean, you'd think this guy hates America. The way he talks about them like they're the lowest of the lowest, trash heap, murder. I mean, at what point do we say that this guy is un-American in these acts that he's doing and the way he's talking about these cities?
Absolutely. And, you know, as I've demonstrated with these historical examples, what Trump is doing is fundamentally un-American, fundamentally undemocratic, fundamentally crushing of a free people. That's what every modern dictatorship has done, set up these kinds of unaccountable police forces to carry out the wishes of the dictator and to terrorize and control those who he sees as dangerous or as his enemies. And that's what makes this so frightening, because we know what happens when you do this. We have all of these historical examples that I have laid out. And plus, you know, he's already showing his extreme bias in what he's doing with these forces, not sending them to the high crime areas, but sending them to heavily minority cities in only blue states. And of course, D.C. is the most heavily Democratic area in the country.
Is there anything that can be done about it? I mean, you know, it's like, are we just at the whim of Trump's thumbs up, thumbs down? I mean, it can't be that. There has to be something to free D.C. I mean, D.C. is literally under the boot of this man, and it's crushing the city. And I know he claims that, you know, crime is rampant and everybody's getting carjacked. And yes, there is crime in D.C. and it needs to be addressed. But it's like he's crushing this city, and it just seems like the residents are totally paralyzed and helpless, and they can't do anything about it.
That's what happens under a dictatorship. People become fearful. paralyzed. They don't go about their normal lives. They're afraid to do things that they would normally do. That's one of the huge prices we pay when we have an authoritarian type government. And again, he's right out in front about this, Sam. This isn't something he's hiding. He's bragging about it. He's promoting it.
I know, but
Pete Hegseth is talking about how necessary this is. You know,
I know, but
the Secretary of Defense.
Right, but like, there's nothing we can do. We're just supposed to sit there and watch as Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump decide to turn the military against its own people. I mean, they're just not. We're just supposed to just accept
It's
this.
very, very difficult. Here's, I have outlined 5 or 6 things people can be doing. You know, get out of the streets and demonstrate. It's dangerous, but, you know, our freedom is at risk. Write op-eds. Speak if you can. Write letters to the editor.
But none of that changes anything. I don't know. I don't know.
Talk to your congressman, and most important, the only way they ain't going to change is if you change the government.